Drexton. He was a very chunky baby. Very chunky baby, and he had blonde hair and bright blue eyes.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. Welcome to Still a Part of Us. We are joined here today by Paris, and she has graciously reached out to us in actually I feel like the wake of some really hard times and dark times right now for her even. So thank you so much for coming on, for being willing to tell us Drexton's story. So thank you very much, Paris.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I just was so pleased to see Drexton's little picture. It's just so cute. He really is. Like, I don't know how to explain how when I opened up the email how delightful his little face looked. And so Paris, let's start out though. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're located, what your family looks like, maybe at the time of Drexton's birth, and maybe what it looks like today. And then we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah. So we live in Queen Creek, Arizona, and it's really hot here. It's really hot here. Our family is three of us. So Drexton's older brother, and then Drexton and then me.
Mm-hmm.
We have some family here, and then the rest is up in Idaho and Montana. So
okay.
We do a lot of traveling there, and then we have family in England, so we do a lot of traveling in England.
Very cool.
Yeah, but trying to think. The situation was, there was four of us at the time, Drexton's dad.
Mm-hmm.
But so his dad is a military veteran. So he had a lot of PTSD and some things that he was trying to battle with mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused for his dad not to be able to be in the picture. Or even be around him. There were some things like we had to get an order of protection and stuff like that. So there's some domestic issues. But now, that kind of leads into everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for a little bit of that background. That does actually help kind of paint the picture. And how old is Drexton's older brother? Is he a little bit, quite a bit older, or?
So he's 3. He just turned 3 on July 13th.
Okay.
So he doesn't seem like a 3-year-old. He seems like a 5-year-old.
Oh, really?
And he has the attitude of a teenager.
So those little three-nagers, and they are just sassy, aren't they?
Yeah. I would say there was the terrible 2s, but I think there's terrible 3s.
I
for sure.
Completely agree with you on
that. So
yep.
It's definitely been an exciting learning experience for me. So
yeah.
But
how fun. And you're living in Arizona, some family nearby. What do you guys like to do as a family?
We really like to spend time with my family. So his Gaga and Pop.
Yeah.
And it's so hot here. It's so hard to get outside sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Occasionally when it's a little bit cooler out, we'll go to the zoo or to the science center, or they have a little art museum here that's very interactive with kids.
Nice.
Which is one of my oldest son's favorite place to go. But when Drexton was alive, the zoo was his thing. I don't know what it was. I think it was just the walking around kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just mostly hanging out with family. Cool. Just kind of doing new things and trying new things and letting the kids see different things. But if we had to pick anything, it'd be the zoo and the pool. We're in the pool and the water parks and the splash pads all the time because it's so hot here.
Yep, I was gonna say you gotta stay cool somehow. We're
Exactly.
not as bad as Arizona. We're in Utah, but man, it gets hot. It's been hot summer, and so
Yes,
you
it
just feel
is
like,
horrible.
Oh, okay. And then one other thing that I wanted to ask was what, in relation to the time that we are recording this episode, when was Drexton born, and also when did he pass away?
So Drexton was born on November 3rd of 2023. And he passed on June 1st of 2024. So very, very recent.
Kind of very recently. And once again, I just am so surprised that you felt like you wanted to tell his story and capture all of your memories with him.
It's definitely hard.
Yeah.
There's good and bad days for sure.
Yes, for sure. Okay, well then, I want to tell me, were you guys planning on getting pregnant? Was he planned?
No.
Was he okay? He was not planned. Okay.
He was a surprise. So kind of a little backstory. Cash actually has a different dad. And I actually never wanted children. I was a nanny for a really long time, and those were my children.
Yeah.
And so I separated from Cash's dad, and when I met Drexton's dad, I didn't want any more children for a very long time until I finished with the police department and the academy and all that kind of stuff. Well, things happened, and I found out I was pregnant, and I think because of that, kind of put some life things on hold.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, like the police academy, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like
that's
I
didn't
hard.
want any more children until after. And after I became a mom, it kind of opened a whole new world that I was meant to be a mom, and I love being a mom.
Yeah.
But I wanted to finish some career stuff first before ever thinking about having another baby. But yes, he was definitely a surprise.
Yeah. Okay. So you were sort of together, but sort of not also, like it was.
So me and Drexton's dad, we were together, but we were kind of still figuring out the ropes of our relationship, and I was still kind of learning more about him and about, his PTSD and stuff like that. And it wouldn't have been the right time, but apparently God had different plans. So
yeah. Okay. So so you got pregnant, and so Drexton's dad was sort of in the picture. Did you tell him? Was that something? I guess tell me when you found out and what your reaction was. And
so we were together. It wasn't like we don't know if we're together or we're just trying to figure out things out. We were together.
Okay.
And at that point, when I did find out I was pregnant, he was very excited. Because it was a talk in the future about having kids.
Oh, okay.
And so he definitely was very excited. And we just kind of had to start getting things and ducks in a row, if that made sense.
Okay.
So I had to change some things. He had to change some things. And then we were together during that whole pregnancy. So it wasn't till after Drexton was born is when issues kind of started to arise more.
Okay. And how was the pregnancy when you first found out, and were you starting to feel sick, or like when you did the actual pregnancy, how like were you?
So I actually I had a really, really rough pregnancy with my first son. So I was actually very nervous, but it actually wasn't terrible. I just had a lot of sciatic pain, and I wasn't as nauseous. I definitely was a little bit, but I was working full time. And at that time I was working at a family doctor's office.
Oh, okay.
Family practice. And so it was really fun because a lot of the kids that would come through in there would like always try to touch my stomach and be like, make a move. And I'm like, I'm trying. But yeah, so it was actually very, very, very well compared to my first pregnancy. Now, when I started getting up to about 27 weeks, well, I guess I should probably go back. Everything was normal. Like the all of his scans, everything was normal. I was actually referred out to maternal fetal medicine because I did have a high risk with my son. So my
Okay.
regular OB sent me to maternal fetal medicine.
Okay.
And my story is a little bit different because
Mm-hmm.
I have also, like, the reason I went to maternal fetal medicine too was because first, Cash was a huge baby and he was born a month early. Like, he was already almost 10 pounds.
Oh,
Yeah, so he was a very, very big baby.
yeah.
And I also have a immune disorder that's called mast cell activation syndrome.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you aren't really supposed to have children. Your body actually rejects having a pregnancy with this autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Those
and
usually,
it,
I assume those usually end up in a miscarriage or something. Is
yes,
that correct?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. And the pregnancies are usually very, very hard and have some issues. So I was being monitored a lot for that. But everything was normal. I mean,
It was
like,
going along fine, and it didn't sound
yeah,
like you were too sick or
no, yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, and what they worry about with this immune disorder is me having a episode while being pregnant because it can actually put you into anaphylactic shock. Um,
Oh.
and it can be kind of dangerous, and you catch different like colds and infections easily,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
more easily than the average person.
Yeah.
So I got referred to maternal fetal medicine, and the only hiccup we had was the glucose test. So originally, we always did like the A1C testing, like the blood test,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
was it. So we would test it every other day, at the same time every other day, and that's how I did it with Cash. But this time they wanted to do the glucose test, which I can't do because too much sugar and the glucose will actually can send me into an episode.
Yeah. So if for those who may not know what that
Yes.
is that you're basically drinking a whole little container of sugar water.
Yes.
And then they let you wait for an hour or so, and then they draw your blood just to see how much
Yes.
your body has cleared is what. And so for your situation, it would have been dangerous to actually do that. So
Yes.
they were monitoring, it sounds like your actual glucose, like a finger prick type of a
No, so
test.
we would actually draw blood.
Oh, you would draw blood
Yes,
that often.
yes,
Holy cow.
yes. That
Ooh.
was with Cash. We drew blood. It felt like
Whoa.
constantly.
Yeah.
And they thought I had gestational diabetes because he
Mm-hmm.
was so big and he
Yeah.
was ahead of schedule, and he never had that. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, this time around, my rheumatologist, who I see for the immune disorder,
Mm-hmm.
suggested a different drink. It's called, I can't remember the name of it. It's similar
Mm-hmm.
to the glucose drink, but it doesn't have certain like sugars, and it's different. So it
Okay.
actually works very well with my immune disorder. So we did that.
Okay.
I didn't pass it.
Mm.
Um, and I know now why I didn't pass it. It was because I ate waffles and no one told me to not eat
Oh,
sugar before my test.
yeah.
So we were planning on doing another test. But life's crazy when you're a single mom and you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
get to these appointments, and or not single mom, but
Yeah,
you don't
but
have anybody to be
right.
watching the kids, or you can't get
Exactly.
off work. And it just so happened the times that I was at work, that was the time that the MFM was open. And then
Eh,
as soon as I got off work, they closed.
they closed. Yeah.
So it was very
It's
much a
hard.
struggle to get into appointments and do all the testing because I always had to go at lunch. So I
Mm-hmm.
never even got to eat my lunch. I had to go during my lunch. So it was very frustrating, but
Yes. Yes.
um, everything was pretty normal. I did have some complaints. Like, everything was fine with Drexton. It
Mm-hmm.
was me that I was having some complaints. My blood pressure was getting pretty high,
Mm-hmm.
and I expressed my concern to MFM, and they said, "Oh, don't worry. Like, this is a normal range." And I was like, "Okay, if you say so."
Was it high for
Um,
you though?
it was very high for me. It
Okay.
was
Hmm.
very high for me, and the things that happened, my concerns, I don't think were being very
Sounds like they weren't listening
validated.
to. Yeah, they weren't really
Yeah.
listening to you.
So, um, I expressed that concern a lot, and it got to the point where it was one time I was at work, and my blood pressure was extremely high that I passed out
Oh.
while at work. So I had to be rushed to the closest hospital to my work.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay, I think that you really need to talk to your high risk and kind of get this evaluated. And I was like, I have been. So ended up talking to them again.
Okay.
And they were like, okay, we're just going to watch it, take your blood pressure at home. So I was, and it was staying stable enough to where it wasn't too much of a concern to me.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up, well, I don't know if we want to get to this part because it gets really close to when Drexton was born because he was born early and
Oh, okay.
unexpected. So,
well, let me ask you a couple of questions then.
sure.
So I was going to ask, because you went to an MFM, did you guys did you decide to like find out his gender early on with a genetic test? Because a lot of people do that when they are being seen by an MFM.
Yeah, so they offered me the test. I did the same test with Cash. It was just to see the gender early.
Okay.
But with Drexen, I didn't really, not that I didn't care. It wouldn't change anything for me. And I
Okay.
was like, I'm going to find out his gender in a couple weeks anyways.
Yeah. Okay. And then
I'm not too worried about it.
And so when you did go in for the anatomy scan, which is around 20 weeks or so, tell me how that went. And when you found out that you were having another little boy.
Yeah. So, it was a pretty normal appointment. Everything was checking out. His growth was to where it needed to be. He
Good.
wasn't
He wasn't too
measuring
big.
early.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was our biggest concern because they always say once you have a big baby, you're probably going to have more big babies.
Right.
So that was a concern. And I did want to try for a VBAC because I had a C-section with Cash.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of trying to make sure everything was going how it needed to be to ensure a VBAC, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
vaginal birth after cesarean is what a VBAC stands for.
Yes. And it's actually much safer for me to do a VBAC with my immune disorder versus a C-section.
Oh, okay.
So
and a lot of times a VBAC is a little risky because there's a possibility that you could, tear old scars or rupture your uterus. I mean, there's all sorts of things also. So that's interesting that they're like, actually, going vaginal is best for you, even despite the risks of that.
It's because of the spinal block and the medicines that they give that can cause me to have an episode even during the C-section. So that's why they tried to push. We tried to push for more of a VBAC this time around.
Okay.
But that didn't happen.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So everything looked good. And then you found out you wanted to know what the gender was or at that visit. Okay.
Yes. And they showed us, they were like, you want to see? And I was like, yes. And then they're like, do I need to show you where it is? And I was like, nope, I had a boy before. And I looked at the screen and I was like, okay, that's a boy. Yeah. That is a boy. There's no doubt about that. So
were you excited?
Very excited. I don't really feel like I'm a girl mom. I'm very much a boy mom. So I was very, very excited. I'd be happy if I had a girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because any baby and any child is like a blessing. But I really wanted a boy because I don't know if I can handle a girl. My mom always says, she's like, I'm waiting for you to get karma. The karma for what you put me through. And I was like, don't say that. Don't say that.
Please, no.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And then once you guys found out that you were having a boy, did you guys have names chosen out or thoughts about what his name should be?
Honestly, I remember we were sitting in the car and we were looking at different names and, oh, do you like this one? Do you like this one? And nothing really stuck. I wasn't a fan of really any of them. He wasn't a fan of any of them. And I remember one day he came back home and he was like, what about this name? And I was like, okay. I was like, never heard it before.
Yeah.
I heard of like Brexton or Braxton.
Yeah.
But never Drexton.
Yeah.
So he was showing me the meaning and I wanted something because I have dual citizenship. So I'm a British citizen and a US citizen.
Okay.
So I wanted something that would kind of go in ordinance to my family.
Yeah, totally.
In England. And so I was looking at it, and some of it originates from England, and
Oh.
yeah, and I guess that obviously I don't know now. I haven't looked at the statistics of it now, but for a time, it was I think only 100 kids with that name.
Oh.
Yeah, so a very small amount. It wasn't a large amount. So it was a very unique name.
Yeah, it totally is.
So I was like, well, when he comes out, we'll try. We had two names. I can't remember the other name.
Yeah.
But we had two names, and I was like, when he comes out, we'll see which one fits, and we'll see. Because I don't like to name before just in case like the name
Yeah.
doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Because Cash was not supposed to be a Cash.
Oh.
Yeah, and then he came out, and I was
You're
like,
like,
yeah, the other name is not gonna work. The other name is not gonna work. So
That's so funny. Yeah, kids, they all
yeah.
come out with their own little personalities and
Oh, yes.
what they look like. So, well, that's super fun. Okay, so yes, let's keep going with, so you are going along. Things are looking good-ish.
Yeah.
You didn't pass the glucose tolerance test, but probably for funny reasons instead of
Yes.
that. But yeah, it sounds like there were some complications kind of near the end, or him
Yes.
coming early rather. So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
So, at work, the doctors would monitor me
Mm.
actually while I was at work because I was complaining so much. I was like, "This isn't right. Something's wrong."
Mm.
And I was like, "I feel like I'm not being listened to." And they're like, "I really think that you need to just go back into your OB one of these days." Because I was seeing him, my regular OB,
Off and on.
often, but
Yeah,
I was
okay.
more seeing MFM.
Okay.
And so one day, I remember I was getting ready to drop Cash off with my mom so I could head into work. It was about like 7 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, you know what? I left pretty early it's like I'll be getting to work pretty early. I'm just gonna stop by the OB's office because I'm just not feeling well. Like
Okay.
I had the worst headache, blurry vision. I couldn't really well, I'm missing something. They did order me the urine test to test
Okay.
for preeclampsia, so the 72-hour collection.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and the results weren't back yet. So,
And about how many weeks was this?
mm, I was probably about 35
Okay.
weeks.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, I'm just not feeling good.
Yeah.
And I think I really need to get checked out. So I dropped Cash off with my mom. Well, I'm mixing up the time frames here. There was so two days before this happened, before him being born,
Mhm.
I went into my OB and I was like, I need something. I need something to take these headaches away or at least ease them. And my blood pressure was pretty high. And
Mhm.
I remember the nurse practitioner who I was seeing was my favorite nurse practitioner. She was
Yeah.
with me for majority of the pregnancy. She was like, you know what? I'm gonna put you on some medication, and it's a low dose, so you're not gonna completely feel fine, but you'll feel like ease with it. But if it continues in the next day and day and a half, or even tonight, and you don't feel any type of relief, I want you to go into triage because your OB is working on call in there.
Oh,
So yeah, and she was kind of like wink, wink,
yeah.
just go
Interesting
in there if you need
coincidence.
to.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I still want to give the medication a chance because
Was it something to bring down your blood pressure? Do you know what it
blood
was?
pressure.
Okay.
I don't know the name of the
No, that's
medication.
okay. I just
But yes, it was to bring down my blood pressure, which should have eased the headaches. So, and the way I was feeling. So in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna take the medication, even though she winked at me and kind of gave me a hint that I could go in there. And
Mhm.
but it was just because I was still super early. I wanted to have them in as long as possible to cook essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
So I took the medication. I still was not getting much ease from it, and
Mm,
that's what encouraged me to go to the doctor that morning,
yeah.
to the triage, to see if maybe they could up my dose or something like that.
Okay.
So, that's when I dropped Cash off, and I decided to head into triage, and, um, I get in there, they take my blood pressure, and it was pretty high, and at that time, it was 155/95,
Okay. Yeah.
which is high.
Yeah.
So, and explaining why I was feeling the way I was feeling. She was like, "Okay, we're gonna up your medication, but I'm gonna go talk to your OB and see what he wants to do, like what range of medication dosage that we wanna do." And within 5 minutes, she came back and she said, "We're gonna get you ready for a C-section." And so I'm still in my work scrubs, and I'm literally like,
"Excuse me?"
I just told my boss I'd be back to work in about 10 minutes because I didn't think any of that was gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, okay, what do I do? Even though I had a C-section before and it did turn into, I was induced with cash and then it turned into a C-section because of his size. I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I was like, how much time do I have? Because technically they were considering an emergency C-section because of my blood pressure. So I was like, how much time do I have? Do I have time to call Drexton's dad, get him here and, call my work so they don't think that I'm just bailing on them.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Yeah, you have about 20 minutes." And I was like, "Okay." So while they're trying to hook me up to stuff, I called Drexton's dad. I was like, "You need to get to the hospital now. I'm going in for emergency C-section." And he was like, "I'm 30 minutes away." And I was like, "Well, figure it out."
Yep.
Like,
get here now.
You're either not going to be here when he's born or you're going to be here. We're going to hang up now and you just start driving. Yeah. And he was in the middle of work. So he came in his construction clothes, all of that kind of stuff. And he was messy, dirty from all the dirt and all that. But I was like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And then my mom, I totally forgot about my mom, just to even call my mom. And she's blowing up my phone. And my work is like, "Are you okay?" Because I guess my manager actually called my mom because I didn't show up. I didn't show back up because I told her I'm going to go get checked and I'll be at work.
Yeah.
So
they're worried.
I'm not there. Yeah, they're worried. And so they call my mom and my mom's like,
freaking out too.
You should be at work because she just dropped off cash.
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, we don't know what's going on." So finally, when everything kind of settled for a second, I called her and I was like, "I'm going in for emergency C-section." And she was like, "Okay." Like freaking out. And she's like, "Do you need me? What do I need to do?" And I was like, "I'm okay, but just get here in the next 30 minutes or so." And she was like, "Okay." And so ended up Drexton's dad gets there literally 2 seconds, like as they're trying to wheel me out. So they get him all gowned up.
Okay, good.
And so he got there just in time. And they take me back and I think it was just there was so much going on, that anxiety, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening. I'm like freaking out. They have me on magnesium for the headaches and stuff like that. And so that makes you feel terrible too.
Terrible. Yes. Absolutely terrible.
Oh my gosh. The way I felt on that was the weirdest feeling I've ever felt. And it also makes you super warm.
So hot. Yep.
Yes. And I hated it because I am not I keep my house at like 67. I cannot, I am a wimp to hot weather or just like temperature. So I remember they took me back and the anesthesiologist went to go put in the spinal block. And he was like, "Are you doing okay?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just need someone to hold my hand." And so a nurse came over. She was so sweet. And she was holding my hand. And I was like, "I don't know why I'm crying." And I was just crying. And she was like, "It's okay." And ended up, they put the spinal block in. And I remember laying down. And I remember my OB, who I love my OB. He's so funny. He was like, "Do you want the radio on? Do you want music?" And I was like, "No, I don't want anything. I don't want anything." And he was like, "Okay." It's so funny that they talk while they're doing surgery on you, like what they ate for lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's
stuff
very
like that.
normal. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I really wanted to play, because when Cash was born, when I was getting my C-section, I don't know if you know the song "More Money, More Problems."
No, I don't, but
in it it says, "I'm coming out." I don't know how to, if you look it up, you'll hear like I'm coming out. I don't even know how to describe it, but
yes, I know exactly what you're talking now that you say that. Okay, yes.
And he literally came out as they were saying that.
Oh
so
my gosh,
that's
that's
Cash's song. So I
so
was like, I
funny.
was really hoping that a cool song would come on
Yeah.
for Drexton. No, it was quiet. All I could hear was them talking and all that kind of stuff. And I remember laying there and I looked at the nurse and I said, I'm gonna throw up. And she was like, are you
Oh.
sure? And I was like, I'm gonna throw up. I need a bag now. And of course, you're just laying there. You're strapped.
You
Like,
can't, your
you
arm is
can't do
strapped down. You
anything.
can't do anything. And you're
Yes,
like, I'm going to throw up in my mouth, essentially, because you can't, it's
and
hard to turn.
it doesn't help that I have a fear of throwing up.
Oh,
So that,
dang it.
it's horrible. I am like one of those pukers who, if you smell it, see it, hear it, done.
It's over.
Yeah. So I remember I was like, I'm gonna throw up. I need a bag. I need the bag now. So I turned my head and the anesthesiologist was like, it's okay. Like, if you need to puke, go ahead and puke. And I was like, no, I can't puke. I promise I'm not gonna puke. And he was like, you can puke. It's okay. And I was like, no. You don't understand. I'm not gonna do it. I promise you right now I'm not gonna puke, but I need to puke. And he was like, okay. So they held a bag next to my head because they really thought I was gonna puke. And I did too. But I kept telling myself, I was like, do not puke.
Don't puke. Don't puke.
And I was like, I just promised the anesthesiologist that I wouldn't, so I'm not going to.
That's
I was like
hilarious.
Determined. I should have just did it. I don't know what I was thinking. But they started cutting and all that kind of stuff, and they brought Drexton's dad in, and I was more awake because with Cash, I was in labor for 26 hours. So by the time I had my C-section, I didn't even see him when he came out. I just heard him. I was so tired.
Yeah.
So this time, I mean, I was awake.
Yeah.
I was originally supposed to go to work. So I was had energy. I obviously didn't feel great, but like I was awake enough.
Yeah.
And so I was watching what was going on, but I was also trying not to puke. So there's just a lot going on. And all of a sudden, I heard my doctor and he was like, all right, he's out. And I didn't really hear him cry at first. And then I did. And he had this like extremely loud cry. Like it's still like burned in my mind. And I remember just like looking around, I was like, where is he? I want to see him. And there's this really cool picture, which I'll put in for you guys so you can see it. But he's actually holding on to the instrument.
Oh,
as they point him out, he's holding on to the instrument. Yes.
Oh,
it was the coolest thing. Yes, it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And he would not let go.
Oh
and
my gosh, that's so funny.
All the doctors and like the nurses that were in there, they were all laughing. And my doctor was like, he won't let go of my instrument. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's
his personality already.
Yes. And so I requested that they didn't do my OB knows that I wanted delayed cord clamping as long as possible. And in the OR, you can only do it for so long.
Okay.
It's not like a vaginal birth where you can let it go white, if that makes sense. In the OR, you have to, I think you get a matter of like 2 minutes or whatever. So he did it as long as he possibly could go for. And they got him all like not cleaned up because I didn't want all of the what's it called?
Just that kind of milky white.
Or is it not?
I know.
It's that coating that is on them to protect them. I didn't really want that wiped off. Like I didn't want them to have a bath or anything like that. Yeah. So they kind of took off all the blood and stuff like that, and then I didn't hear the conversations that were being had behind me while I was waiting, but I do have videos of him in the warmer, and this will come into context later on, but he didn't really pink up. He would cry, but he was still very like blue and purple.
Oh, okay.
And which now it all makes sense. At the time when I watched the videos, I was like, why is he not pinking up? The video, like he should have been pinking up by now. But he was crying. And he was kind of having those, it's like labor kind of breathing.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like kind of right. He's 35
Yes.
weeks, so right.
Yes. So he was just 36 weeks. He just
30.
turned
Oh,
36
okay,
weeks.
okay.
So he was still early, and they were thinking about taking him to the NICU.
Yeah.
Depending on his like glucose and his sugar levels and all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't figure out. I was like, man, it's taking him a really long time to pink up. Like he should by now, with how much time went by, he shouldn't be blue or purple.
Yeah.
So he wasn't oxygenating the rest of his body correctly.
Yeah.
And so at the time, that wasn't a thought in my mind because I didn't see the videos till later. But after a while, when they were sewing me back up, they brought him over to me, and I have a couple of like really cute pictures because he was crying like crazy. And then as soon as, he touched my face, they brought him over to me, and he just like went right back to sleep. And it was just such a calm feeling. I think because of all the anxiety of everything, that as soon as he was placed next to me and I could feel him and I could hear him and see him, the anxiety was all gone.
Yeah.
And they took me to postpartum, and I did skin to skin, and I couldn't believe how small he was. He was
How big was he? Yeah.
He was 6 pounds, 12 ounces, but really small in length. Like I can't remember his exact length. Compared to Cash, who was 10 pounds.
10 pounds
and
probably really
like
long.
20 inches long, like huge.
Yeah.
And I remember just holding him, and I was just like, I don't know what to do.
You're itty bitty.
I know. I was like, you're so tiny. And I remember my mom came in, and she was holding him, and she was like, he's so tiny. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. And so I breastfed him, and he wasn't really doing that well with that. Obviously he was super early, so he didn't know.
Babies
He
have a
wasn't
hard
ready
time.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just are trying to figure out.
It was definitely a learning experience with me for that, because with Cash, he went straight to it.
Okay.
And Drexton did slowly start trying to, but I think he was like, the heck is going on? Like, this is not, I'm not ready like
for
it
this.
out here. This sucks. So ended up, they took me to my postpartum, the postpartum ward, and my blood pressure still wasn't going down.
Oh, no.
Even after everything. And what's crazy is I got my, as I was in my C-section, they got my results back from the 72-hour collection.
Yeah.
And I was off the chart.
I'm sure.
I had preeclampsia really bad.
Yeah.
So,
gosh, they need to take care of you. Holy cow.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, my blood pressure wasn't going down. The headaches weren't going away. And they had me on magnesium. They had me on different types of medication. And what was frustrating is that I was ready to walk. Like, I was like, I'm ready to get up. Like, as soon as the spinal block wore off, I was like, I need to get up. Well, because of the magnesium, they don't let you get up and walk.
Yeah.
So I didn't walk for the next 12 hours and ended up getting gas pains in my shoulder.
Oh,
and
that's the worst. It hurts
that
so
was the
bad.
worst. Yes, it was the worst feeling I've ever experienced. And I was like crying hysterically. And like the nurses were bringing warm packs to put on my shoulders and all that. And it was all because I couldn't walk, but I could. Like, the magnesium really didn't put me in a spot where I was scared to walk or was dizzy or anything like that. Like, I could have easily walked. They just wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
So, ended up, they got me to start walking after the 12 hours, and they said it would help the gas pain. It did not. It did not. That was probably the worst. And ended up, my blood pressure still wouldn't go down after days. Man. So usually when you get released after like about 3 days.
Yeah.
3 days for a C-section. I didn't get to leave for 8 days.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, and it's because they are worried that you're going to have eclampsia, which could basically kill you if it's not controlled. So
yes. And so they actually discharged Drexton first. before me.
Oh man, that's the
So
worst.
I was like, thank goodness that the day that they discharged him, they actually later that day discharged me too. I was like, I'm not leaving without him. So like, I don't know what you guys are gonna do.
Yeah.
But during that time, they were kind of on the fence about taking him to the NICU and whatnot. And of course, because of all the medication, my milk was not coming like at all. So his his sugar levels were going down, and they were essentially saying like, well, we're gonna have to formula feed. And I was like, I really don't want to. I just like, I want to be off these medications because then I know my milk will come through. And they were like, the reason I didn't want to start him on a bottle right away is because I had trouble with Cash, because we started a bottle and then he would have trouble going to the breast. So I was like, I want to try. I really want to try. And I did breastfeed Cash for a very long time. It just was a struggle and lots of lactation consultants. So I was like, I just want to try. And I was pumping like all the time. I was trying to self express. I was doing everything I possibly could just to get something, you know, and it didn't need a lot, just to get things flowing as much as possible and get as much colostrum and just syringe feed him if I had to.
Yeah.
Well, and he passed all of his tests, his hearing tests, all the tests that they come in and do. He passed them except for the car seat test, which will actually come in down the road. He didn't pass his car seat test, so they waited another 12 hours to do the second car seat test. He didn't pass that.
Tell the listeners what the car seat test is so that they know what's entailed in that.
So they, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% sure exactly how it works. I just kind of know the gist is that they place them in a car seat with a bunch of monitors to monitor their heart rate, their oxygen to make sure it doesn't decel, and his decelled every single time. So he would either stop breathing, and his heart rate would go really low. So you have to pass that in order to go home.
Yeah, because the baby will likely be in the car seat a good chunk of time, one way or the other. And it does put them, I don't know much about the car seat test. And so when you said that, but I was like, that does make sense, because when you put a baby in that position, it can like maybe restrict their breathing or.
Yeah. So he didn't pass the first one. So they waited, you have to wait 12 hours before you can redo a second car seat test. So they redid it, didn't pass that one. And at that point they were like, okay, if he doesn't pass the next one, he's gonna have to stay here in the NICU.
Yeah.
He ended up passing the second one. And
the third one.
I wish I would have asked more questions when that happened. But I didn't. I was just happy for him to be able to go home and that he passed. And his pediatrician came and saw him every single day, sometimes twice a day. And other than that, he was healthy. I mean, they didn't really have any issues other than his sugars, but they said his sugars have to be rising this amount for us to consider you to go home.
Okay.
And so ended up, I was able to get his sugars every single checkpoint. Like every time they came and checked his sugars, I was able to get it higher and higher and higher into the amount that it was okay.
Okay.
So,
so were you able to start breastfeeding him then by the end of the time that you were there?
Yeah, okay. I was able to breastfeed him. I just don't think he was understanding, like he was still so early and the latch was not there.
Exactly. That is it's tricky for those little early babies.
A lot of it was syringe feeding.
Yeah, okay.
And he would drink some. It's hard. It was very hard for him. So we were able to finally leave, and I got into a lactation consultant, like literally within that week.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot, and we were able to breastfeed.
Okay.
So he was doing really good. He was chunky. He was a very chunky baby, but I did struggle with the headaches. I was on blood pressure medication for, I think, 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I finally was able to get off of it because my blood pressure settled out to where it is now. So that was definitely hard. And I do think there's some situational things that were happening after he was born that probably made my blood pressure go up.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to go into some of those things that
Sure.
caused some stress? It sounds like
Yeah.
stress and other external things that made it difficult.
Yes. I so Drexton's dad, I think as soon as the birth happened, there was some issues that started to arise. And some very concerning issues. But at the time I was more worried about Drexton and what was happening with him and us healing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad the PTSD was because I've never experienced it to the extent it turned into. So he was dealing with a lot of like psychosis from it. And there was a bit of arguing and some issues that were happening during that time with Drexton's dad. So about 2 weeks after Drexton was born, Drexton's dad got into a psychosis moment and did end up getting physical with me, which ended up having the police involved and stuff like that. So that was a struggle because, I mean, it's so hard because you want to be there for your partner.
Yeah.
But it's like you can only help so much. And at the end of the day, I mean, you can't, if a person doesn't want to get help, that's on them. And so I kind of was like at that point where I was like, you know what, there was a safety issue that needs to be evaluated here. And I do not feel comfortable because of the actions that happened. That you can't be alone with him. And I don't really, even though it wasn't directed towards Drexton, it was directed towards me. But he was in my arms when the things happened. So it's a huge thing. And ended up there after 2 weeks of that, there ended up being another physical event. So it was just I couldn't let things continue to repeat themselves. And so that's when the order of protection came about. And the just so like I don't know if people know about order protections, it's very hard to get a child on an order protection. It's not hard to get an order protection, but it's really hard to get a child on an order protection. It was granted that Drexton would be on the order protection, so he was a protected party as well as me. And after that, it was learning a new normal, like juggling 2 kids, a newborn, and being a single mom. And it was definitely very hard, but I didn't let it stop me. So I decided to go back to work, and I didn't go back to the family doctor's office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I had my maternity leave, but I was supposed to get a raise and I didn't. And I couldn't support my family on that type of pay. So I was like, you know what? I think it's time to maybe start thinking about going back into the police force. And trying that route again. But because of my surgery and the medical issues with the headaches and the preeclampsia, it was just probably not the right time to even think about that. So I decided to get into like executive protection and bail bonds. So I was doing that, and I still am. But I got into that business, and it's definitely the closest thing you can to being an officer. I mean, we just don't carry a badge, but we still have to deal with the same type of people. So that's been my life. Raising 2 kids and doing that. So
and I suspect that has been, I mean, that's probably been very difficult, and it sounds like you have family and a support group. I mean, not a support group, but like a support system to help you in this. This is probably like, oh my goodness. Like you said, now I have an infant, and this has been changing, and that's a lot.
It was hard because actually my mom and my stepdad were planning on moving out of state. So I was like kind of preparing myself, like, I'm gonna be the only one left here.
Yeah.
I was like, I really needed to make sure ducks were in a row before they left because that was my support system here.
Yeah.
And so that was very hard, and it's very my job is very emotionally taxing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I aid law enforcement, I aid with the US Marshal Service, so, there's a lot of things that are very taxing, and then to come home and then have my Drexton and then a 2-year-old, it was very hard to go from work mode to mom mode, like,
Yeah,
"Okay, it's
because
time
mom
to
mode
do
is a
this."
full-time job too.
Yes, and it's very, very hard, but I figured it out,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Okay, I have the hang of things," and we're just kinda living this was our family,
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
the 3 of us,
Yeah.
and everything was going really smoothly. I was actually ready, emotionally for my mom and my stepdad to move out of state.
Okay.
I got in the right headspace for that.
Yeah. You do
Um,
need to prepare yourself mentally, I think,
yes.
for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
When did they move out of the state?
so they were planning. They were, like, literally they sold their house,
Oh,
3 months before Drexen passed. They sold their house, and they were
yeah.
getting ready, and they were just trying to finish up, making sure their house, in Idaho was figured out,
Ready.
and ready, because there was some issues with that. So it was a waiting game, and literally the Friday that Drexton, all this stuff happened with Drexton, they were literally leaving that weekend to move. Yeah, so it was crazy.
Yeah. So when you started going back to work though, and you said you took some maternity leave, how
Yes.
long did you take off to heal? I mean,
Um,
I just want
yeah.
to point out you had a C-section, you're dealing with the eclampsia stuff, and that can do a number on your body and everything, and then making sure that Drexton was healthy and getting bigger, like you said, getting chunkier.
Yes. Well, I'll kind of put it into context because originally I was going to go back to trying to get on with an agency, of course, but I actually did the physical test at 6 weeks
Oh, okay.
after my C-section, which is
6
not
weeks.
okay.
No, that's
Um,
fast. That's the
yeah.
yeah.
So after I did that, I was like, okay, I think I need to wait a little while.
Yeah.
My body, I was fine, but I knew my body was like, you are
Mm,
pushing the limit,
yeah.
girlfriend. Like
Yeah.
you need to slow it down.
Okay,
And
okay.
so I tried to get back into work as soon as the like around the 8 weeks.
'Kay.
And that's when I was having those meetings with the family practice. And then I was like, you know what? Time to move on to bigger and better things. And I went, I got hired with this company at about when I was about 13 weeks postpartum.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, but still I mean, just a few months after.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
But I knew I had to get ready to go back to work because I was at the point where I was like,
you
"Mm, you're one person supporting 2 children,
yeah,
and you gotta start getting things
yeah.
prepared." So,
And then your mom and stepdad helping watch, the kids
yes.
when you did start transitioning back to work?
Yes, so they would help, and then I also had a nanny that would come in. I had 2 nannies. One, stayed until he was about 4 months old.
Okay. Mhm.
So she would come over whenever I was working, and it was also nice. She had a little boy. She was a
Oh,
single mom, and she had a little boy, so our 2
they
boys
would
were the
just
same age,
play.
and they would play with each
Mhm.
other, and it was great. So I definitely had a lot of support, and I had a lot of help in case I ever needed it. So I definitely took
Yeah.
advantage of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a blessing right there for sure.
Yes. Yeah, and then we met the nanny that was currently watching the kids actually, moved out of state.
Mm,
So I was like, "Okay, I gotta find someone new."
yeah.
And I was interviewing people. I was very picky
Yeah.
on, nannies, and I preferred them to be in my home That's what I wanted
Right.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
is for them to be at my home. And I met Drexton and Cash's current nanny. And I don't know what it was. I just knew right away, like, that you're
the right person for.
Yeah, I just didn't. I felt I didn't have any off feelings or anything like that. I just knew. So yeah, she became both the kids' nanny at about 4.5 months. Like, Drexton was about 4.5 months old when she came in the picture.
Okay.
So, and then she also has a little boy too.
Oh, okay.
So it was like perfect.
That was really nice too.
Yeah.
Paris, so I do want to just make sure that I cover a couple of things that I've been thinking about. So how was Drexton as a little baby infant and how was he as he started to get a little bit older? I know that there was obviously, and this is kind of a side question, I know there was obviously some maybe some tiny concerns about him, not, like you said, not pinking up, or maybe some issues. Was he thriving? Was he doing okay? Also, physically and such?
I did have some concerns, which does come up later, that were chalked out to be normal. I did notice that when he would feed, like, it's normal for a baby to, like, switch off breathing, when they're feeding, because they can't breathe at the same time.
Yeah.
But after he'd get done feeding, on the breast or even a bottle, sometimes it would take him a lot longer to get a breath after. You could pull the bottle out or you could pull your breast out, and he would take a long time to start breathing again normally. So I did ask his pediatrician, and she chalked it up to being normal. And I was like, okay, like, if you say so, you're the doctor here. I trust everything you say.
Yeah.
And he would get tired very easily. Like, and usually newborns and babies, they sleep a lot, but he would do tummy time, and he was already starting to try to crawl. So he was meeting all of his milestones that he needed, but he would get so exhausted, and he would just literally fall asleep while he was doing tummy time.
Yeah.
And she said that was normal. I mean, that's a lot of work for a baby. So I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
His fingernails would sometimes turn blue. Like, the bed of his fingernails would turn blue. And I brought that to the doctor's attention, and she said, well, what's the temperature of your house? And I was like 67. And she was like, well, that's cold. So he's probably cold. And I was like, but he's sweating. So I don't really think he's cold. And it's not like he's in just a diaper. I mean, he's pretty
bundled up,
long sleeves, like onesies, stuff like that. So I was like, and he's sweating even during that time. So I don't think he's cold. And she was like, oh, it's okay. Like, just maybe bring up the temperature. And I was like, okay. And it didn't happen enough to really make me concerned. But I was still like, okay. I mean, you're the doctor. I'm going to trust what you say.
Right.
So, also another thing, I thought it was very weird. He should have been drinking, at the age that he passed away, he should have been drinking like 7 to 8 ounce bottles. And he wasn't. He would feed more frequently, but he could only finish about 4 to 5 ounces.
He was kind of spent after a certain point.
Yes. And I brought that concern up, and she was like, he's a smaller baby. Like, he's chunky. Like, he just might not be able to handle that much. And I was like, oh, no, he should be able to drink that. And it shouldn't be as many feedings as we're having.
Right.
So again, chalked everything up to being normal. But other than that, like, he was a funny baby.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He loved to talk. And he had just the cutest little laugh. Like, sometimes I just watch videos and I'm just like, oh, like, and it really gets to me because it was just so cute. And him and his brother were connected to the hip. Like, they loved each other so much. And every time I'd go get Drexton out of the bassinet, his brother would be like, that's my baby. That's my baby. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's your baby, I really need some help.
Oh, cute.
But yeah, it was really cute, and they would talk to each other. It was really, really sweet.
Yeah.
But Drexen also was his emotion-wise, it was very 1 to 100. So
Oh,
he could be happy one second and just off the wall bonkers the next. It was very
really?
crazy, and I was like, "You remind me of your dad."
Yeah. Oh.
Um, but, I mean, and you could easily fix it with a bottle
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
he didn't really use a pacifier, so,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, we always laughed, we were like 1 to 100, like, it was crazy. Um, and it was just so funny too because his dad, is Bolivian,
Mhm.
and I think he's Hispanic and, Black, and when he came out, he had black hair, right, and it
Yeah.
was kinda starting to curl, so I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, his hair's gonna be cute and, like, really
Yeah.
curly."
Yeah.
Ended up it turned blonde, and he had bright blue eyes, and we're like, "Okay, they're gonna change," because his
Oh, yeah.
dad has brown
Oh,
brown
yeah.
eyes. Um, I was like, "They're gonna change." No.
Did
Nope.
not change.
He he was blonde with blue eyes, no curls. I was like, "What is going on here?" And I was like, the only
Genetic.
part of his body that actually had a tint of color was his belly button. That was it. I was like
Oh,
I was
that's
like, "Oh."
funny.
But yeah, like he had all the facial features of me except
Yeah.
for his nose, and his nose was his like dad.
Is dad's.
So, in some of his expressions, I'd be like, "You look like your dad.
Oh,
You look like your
yeah.
dad."
Yeah.
Um, Especially when he was like going the 1 to 100, and if he was angry, you could see it in his face. So I was like, "Oh my god, you look like your dad."
Yeah.
Like, wow, okay. But yeah, no, he was super funny, and he always wanted to see what was going on.
Mm.
He didn't wanna be left out. Like, if we were all out, at my mom's place,
Yeah.
they have, like, quads, and we have the horses there and stuff like that. He wanted to be all involved.
Oh.
So, like, there was even one time I have a picture too, I was driving the quad, and I had him he was about 5 months at the time. I think he was
Mhm.
about 5 months. I had him in the carrier
Mhm.
and facing forward, and I drove with him on the quad. I
Yeah.
mean, nothing too fast, but he loved it. He just sat there and was like, "Wow." It was really funny.
Taking it all in. I know, it's
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
I can
Yeah,
see why he would
so
have fun.
yeah, he wanted just to be held by everybody. He had such a beautiful personality.
Mm.
And he was really an easy baby. He really was. I mean, you swaddled him, he would take a nap. Like, he was already on, like, a strict like, both my kids were on, like, strict routines,
Yeah.
um, even right out of the hospital. I mean, it's really hard for, like, a newborn, but I tried to implement a routine
Pretty
when they
quickly.
were about 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
So I'd start bath time at about 7 and try to go to bed about 7:30, and he got to that routine very fast.
Huh.
So and it was really funny because I remember, um, I don't remember what we were doing. Oh, we were getting ready to, we were having the party for my parents to move away, so
Oh,
a going
yeah,
away
a going a
party.
party. Uh-huh.
And I remember my mom was like, "Man, he's really on point with his routine," because it hit 7 o'clock and he was, like, already starting to doze off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he knew his routine.
His little
Mhm.
body was very aware.
Yes, yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah, I can't tell you, like, so I have, Pear sent me a picture of Drexton kind of early on, and he has the cutest little face and the sweetest little smile. You guys, he's just so cute. I can imagine he was delightful. Just
yeah,
a cute, cute little guy.
he's funny. He's really funny, and if I couldn't make him laugh, which was on a rare occasion, the one person that could make him laugh was his brother,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they would just talk, like, it was crazy. I had to sometimes stop them. I'd be like, "Okay, guys, we need to go," and they'd just be like, "Talk, talk, 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 talk," and I'm like, "No, we need to go. Like, we have places we gotta go," and they just talk for hours if I let them. I was just
That
like, "Oh my goodness."
that's really so sweet. That
Yeah,
What a fun bond between those
yeah,
two little brothers.
it was really cute.
Yeah. Okay, so I hate to bring up these next few this little bit of time, but can you tell us what happened as he got a little bit older?
Yeah. So Cash went to his dad's house because he'll go on the weekends sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so their nanny would watch Drexton on Friday nights for me. And this was May 24th of 2023. And on Fridays, I usually drop Drexton off at her place from about 4:45, 5, and then she'll have him till about 12 when I get off.
Yeah.
And
sorry, let me just make sure. And it was 2024, right? It
correct.
was just May of 2024.
Yes.
Okay.
This year.
Yeah.
And everything was normal. Started getting ready for work. He was happy and go lucky. I did notice he was a little bit fussy that day. Now that I think back on things, he was a bit more fussy, but I think it was also now I think it's I think he knew. I don't really know. Some things were just a little bit off compared to our usual routine.
Yeah.
But other than that, he had a great day and was happy. And I remember we started to head over to nanny's, and every time he would see the nanny, he was so happy. Like he would just look at her and he would just start smiling and laughing. And to kind of bring some understanding, whenever it was like Friday nights, the routine was she would get him ready she would do like a lot of tummy time and playing with him until about 7:00. 7:00, he would get his bottle and he would go down for his first, because he was still waking up, like I said, frequently to feed because he was feeding quite a lot. So he would only sleep at night around 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
So 7:00, he would get his feed, and then he would go down, and then he'd wake up usually about 10:00. So I normally get a text like 7:00. Oh, he got his bottle and then he's going down for bed. And then about 10, 11 o'clock, I'd get a message. Oh, he woke up. I'm going to feed him and then we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
So it wasn't unusual for me not to hear from her until about 10:00.
Yeah.
And she would send me pictures and stuff before he would go down for bed. But usually I'm not on my phone as much at work because I deal with very unpredictable people that are influenced by drugs and a lot of gangs and stuff like that. So I have to be very, very vigilant, and I can't be on my phone, not even really looking on my Apple Watch because anything can happen at any time. It's not a good area where I have to work. So I dropped him off and he was super, super happy, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And I started my way to work.
Yeah.
And I remember I got to work and everything was going pretty normal. Everything was pretty normal. I didn't really have anything crazy happen when I was at work.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend Amanda, who is a nurse at one of the local children's hospitals here. She's kind of like my medical proxy, if that makes sense. So if anything happens to the kids, obviously my mom is an emergency contact. But regarding medical decisions, Amanda and I have very similar views and things.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what I want if something happened.
Yeah. Okay.
So her and I have a rule that if you call more than 3 times, then it's an emergency. And I remember I kept seeing her call and I was like, why? She knows I'm at work. And I was like, she knows I'm at work. I'm just I'll step aside and I'll call her back real fast. So I call her and she's like, Paris, there's officers with the local county that are calling me and they won't tell me what's going on, but they need to get a hold of you. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And immediately I thought something happened maybe with Drexton and his dad.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that popped in my head because his dad was pretty angry about the situation of not being able to see him. So I was like, okay, give me the number because I didn't miss any calls from an unknown number, just her. So I was like, send me the number and I'll give them a call. And so I called the number. An officer picked up and said, "This is Officer so and so. Is this Paris?" And I said, "Yes. What's going on?" And he said, "I need you to get to this hospital. We're doing life-saving measures on your son." And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
is this a joke? And I was like, I'm 45 minutes away. I was like, how? I was like, okay, like,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'll be there. Like, they couldn't tell me anything else. I tried and tried to ask them to give me any more information. They didn't. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 45 minutes away from this hospital. And I knew what hospital it was. And I was just like, okay. And I ran.
Yeah.
I ran to my car and I started taking off my equipment, my vest. I do carry a firearm and all my other tactical equipment. So I'm ripping things off as I'm trying to drive. And I'm calling Amanda and I'm like, you need to get to the hospital now. They said they're doing life-saving measures on Drexton. I don't know what's going on. You're gonna get there before I am because she was only 15 minutes, 20 minutes from the hospital.
Yeah.
So I was like, you're in charge. You get there, figure out what's going on. Plus, she's a PICU nurse and a cardiac nurse at one of the hospitals.
Yeah.
So I was like, get there now. And she was like, okay, I'm 15 minutes. I'm leaving the house right now. I said, okay. And I remember I called my mom and I was like, get to the hospital. They're doing life-saving measures on Drexton. And she was like, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know. And she could tell by my scream, it wasn't just something like, oh, going to the hospital. She could tell by the way I was screaming. She was like, she knew.
Yeah.
And so I hung up. And I'm at this point, I don't remember the drive. I think it was I'm glad I don't remember the drive because I'm going to assume I was driving at speeds that were very dangerous. And at that point, I am just I'm ripping off stuff because I know deep down I can't take any of this stuff in the hospital.
Yeah.
So I get off the exit and I'm pulling into the entrance of the hospital and I'm on the phone with Amanda and I'm like, where are you? She was like, I'm 5 minutes away still. And I'm like, I don't know how I made it in that proximate time without crashing into someone, hurting someone else, or even hurting myself.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I just remember getting to the entrance of the hospital. And mind you, it was a Friday night. It was about 9 o'clock. So there's still people out driving.
Yep.
And so I'm not 100% sure how I made it there safely, or even got pulled over. I don't know how I did get pulled over.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm literally about to pull in. And she was like, I'm like coming down the street. And I was like, okay. And I remember I parked and there was no close parking spot. So I parked in a handicap spot. And I remember I just got out of the car and I ran towards one of the entrances. And I look at the entrance and I'm like, this isn't the emergency room. And I was like, where am I? Like, I don't know where this emergency room is. I followed the arrows. And all of a sudden, I realized that's the women and children's entrance for maternity and the other floors. And I'm like, oh my God. So I just take off running. I've never ran that fast in my life. I'm not a runner. And I remember I got to the entrance of the emergency room and there was just people everywhere. And I was just pushing. And I just didn't even care. I was like, sorry if I hurt you. I'm so sorry. I just was running through people. And I got to the front desk and I was like, where's my son? And I was screaming. And I was like, where's my son? My son's here. Where is he? And they were just all looking at me like I was crazy. And I was like, my son's here. Like, my son Drexton, he's here. And they were like staring at me. And I was like, oh my, did I come to the wrong hospital? And I was like, just sitting there. And all of a sudden, a nurse comes over and she's like, ma'am, I need you to sit down. I need to get some information from you, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And the reason they didn't know who I was talking about is because, so the nanny knows him by my last name. No one really knows him by his dad's last name. And on his birth certificate, his last name is his dad's last name.
Okay.
But everybody thinks that his last name is my last name. We just say he's
Okay.
one of us, right?
Yeah.
So she told the officers my last name, not his last name, his actual last name. So they couldn't register him up in anything. He wasn't showing up in anything. So they registered him as a John Doe.
Oh.
A baby Doe or baby John Doe. So they, of course, had no idea what I was coming in for.
Oh my gosh.
What are you talking about? So finally I was able to be brought back, and there was officers everywhere. And I was just like, what is going on? And they're like, we can't tell you, it's a investigation. And I'm like, what do you mean an investigation? I've literally only been gone for a couple hours at work. I don't understand. And I remember they had me standing in front of one of the rooms where he was, and the doctors and nurses were working on him. And all I could see was feet underneath the curtain. The curtain wasn't open. So I just see feet rushing around and just bells going off and stuff like that. And I'm just sitting there like, what is happening? And I immediately was like, and the reason I say this is I know he can go 1 to 100, Drexton, emotion wise. And so it can be a little frustrating to calm him down. But I remember sitting there and I was like, if she shook my baby, I'm going to go to jail. And they couldn't tell me anything. So I was still just sitting there like, what is happening? Like, no one is explaining anything. And I remember I saw a pair of cowboy boots underneath the curtain, and I lost it. Because, you only see cowboy boots in like all the shows, all the medical shows, like doctors wearing cowboy boots. So I was like, who is that? And I said some very choice words. And I was like, who the heck is that? Blah, blah. And they were like, it's just the doctor. It's just the doctor. And I was about to lose it because no one's telling me what's happening.
Yeah.
I see cowboy boots in there when that's not a normal thing in a hospital, but I guess it is. And I was so confused. I was literally hyperventilating. I was freaking out. And I remember the doctor finally came out and was explaining what was going on. And I didn't hear a thing he said. I didn't hear a thing. He was telling me everything that was going on, and I didn't understand anything he was saying. Even though I have some medical experience of EMT and stuff like that, I just wasn't listening to what he was saying.
No. Yeah.
And he finally said, you want to see him? And I said, yeah. What kind of question is that? Of course I want to see him. And so I run over to him, and they said, he's stable, but we don't know how much damage. And we had to restart his heart twice. And I was like, but like what? I didn't even know what to say.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at him. He's intubated, and he's just laying there. And in my head, I'm like, open your eyes. Like, what do you do? Like, what is going on? And so I'm holding him. And I had to be very careful because I guess they had trouble intubating him. So they were just about to get him up to CT. And so they had him bagged. They were bagging him because they were getting ready to go up there to do some scans. And I remember I was just holding him, and the doctor was like, he's stable. That's good. We don't really know what's going on. And I was like, okay. And I remember just looking at him, and I just kept saying, I love you, and I'm so sorry. And I remember they were like, we have to get him up to CT. We need to get these scans, and then you can see him in the PICU unit. And I was like, I looked at the nurse who was bagging him, and I looked at him, and I was like, please keep my baby safe. And he was like, I promise. And there's so many people during this time that was very impactful. And he was like, I promise I will keep him safe. And I was like, okay. But I didn't let go. Like, they were telling me, like, you need to let go. You need to let go because we have to go. And I just didn't. Because, I mean, like, how are you supposed to let go? You know, they tell you to let go. And I'm like, that's my baby. I can't let go. And so I remember the doctor started prying like my hands off of him because they needed to go. And I remember I just started like fighting him, and he just put me in a huge like bear hug, and he didn't let go. And I blacked out. I don't remember anything. I just remember the big bear hug and then sobbing. And then I remember coming to in a chair. And then there was my friend Amanda, my mom, and my stepdad, and a social worker, and officers still everywhere. But I wasn't in the room anymore. I was like in a hallway. And so the social worker is bombarding me with questions. And I'm like, I don't even know what's happening. I don't even know what's going on.
Like, what kind of questions was she asking you? Do
She
you
was asking,
remember?
like, were you ever in a dangerous situation? Just like the most bizarre questions. What was his routine? Did he seem normal when you dropped him off? All this stuff. And I remember just saying, why is the nanny not answering her phone? And that was the only answer I had to the question, to all of her questions. I said, why is the nanny not answering her phone? And I texted her. I said, why is PD? What's going on? Why is PD? Why is Drexton in the hospital? Never got an answer. And so they kept asking questions. I was like, he was normal. Everything was normal. Nothing was out of the blue. Nothing. And I remember, I think this what brought me back. My stepdad, while the social worker was there, he was like, if I find out that she did something to him, I will be going to jail, and I will whatever. Assuming you can figure out what I was trying to say.
Yes.
And I don't know what it was about that, hearing someone else say that, and I immediately looked at him and I was like, she would never do anything to him. She loved my kids more than her own. She loves my kids like they're her everything. She didn't do anything. And I don't know why. I don't know why that snapped me out of that thought of hearing someone else say that to then being like, no, I know. I know she didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So ended up we were sitting, they moved us up to the PICU waiting room. Okay. And an officer came in and we started talking, and he said, this is all I know right now. We're still investigating, but his nanny laid him down in the bassinet and he went to sleep, and she was checking on him every 5 minutes because he had a weird sleeping thing. Like, he would sleep on his belly, sleep on his back, he sleep on his side. It was kind of all over the place. I didn't like when he slept on his belly, and neither did she.
Yeah.
So she would check on him and notice that he rolled onto his stomach. So she turned him back, and he went back to sleep.
Yeah.
So she went to, pretty sure what she said. I can't remember exactly, but either she went to go fill up her water bottle or throw in laundry into the washing, which was less than 5 minutes, which is crazy because all this happened in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
She came back and noticed that he was on his belly. So she turned him back over and noticed that he didn't try to go back to sleep. And she noticed he didn't flinch or anything, but he still looked normal. Like, no secretions from his mouth, not blue. His lips were pink, everything. And she just knew. And she grabbed him out and started CPR. And her fiance then called 911, and they were able to get there within 2 minutes. The officers, there's 2 officers on scene, and they were able to get there in 2 minutes. They took over CPR.
Okay. And
then ambulance was at the hospital after another 5 minutes. They were like en route.
That is so fast.
It was, when they were telling me those numbers, I was like, this is insane. And so ended up, she couldn't respond back to me because the officers told her not to respond back to me until the investigation was done. So of course I'm sitting here like, what's going on with my kid? Like,
everything's probably going through your brain.
Yeah. And so they were explaining, the officer explained the situation, and they were like, we're not sure if he had a seizure. We're not sure if he just stopped breathing. We don't know. And so I'm just sitting there like, okay, like, when can I see him? And that's when the social worker was like, well, they're getting him all adjusted in the PICU right now. They're setting up all of his stuff and his ventilator and all that and the medications. And I said, okay. And so it was me, Amanda, my mom, and my stepdad. We were sitting in this like PICU quiet area, where you kind of get news and stuff, and where other kids can come and play, like that are state or guests or whatever.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And by this time, it's like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So, I have people calling me nonstop. Family, friends, and I'm just like, I'm not talking to anybody.
No.
I don't know. I don't even know what's going on. So how do I explain this situation to everybody else? And a doctor comes in, and she's sitting there, and she's like explaining the situation. He's stable, and he's doing really, really good, and I think he's gonna make a full recovery. And I'm like, okay, but what is going on? Like, I don't understand what's happening. So I don't know. She was like, well, his levels are looking good. Everything is looking good. We'll get the CT back soon, to make sure there's no like trauma or to rule out, shaken baby or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so he's going to make a full recovery. And she said that he might have some deficits because of going without oxygen.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, deficits, that's livable. That's not a big deal. Like, this is good news. And so she left, and we were waiting. And then another doctor came in, and she was like, hi, I'm going to be one of Drexton's doctors.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And I just could tell by her face something wasn't right. And mind you, the other doctor just left about 10 minutes ago. So I was just like, why are you looking at me like this?
Yeah.
Like, something's weird. And I looked at her, and I knew, and I said, it's not good, huh? And she was like, no. And I'm like, why did that doctor just come in and tell me that he's going to make a full recovery with some deficits?
Yeah.
And she said, I don't know, but that's not true. I remember I looked at her, and I was like, I do not want that doctor anywhere near me or my family or my child, and I better not see her ever again anywhere near my family or my son. And she was like, okay, I will make sure that doesn't happen. I was like, I do not want to see it, just like that false hope. Like, why would you come and tell me that when you knew actually what his levels were and his blood work, what it showed?
Exactly.
Why would you say that?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying miracles don't happen, but in the situation of what happened, that was not logical.
That is so bizarre. Like,
yes. Ended up, when I was speaking to his doctor, his one that would be with him for the rest of his time there, I remember I told her, I was like, and it might have came off like during this whole time, I think a lot of people thought I was like emotionless, but I handle things a lot different than a normal person. Like, I don't want things sugar coated. I want to know exactly what's happening. I want to be in with the meetings that the doctors have, the going over reports and with the new doctors or nurses or whatever. I want to be involved with everything. I want to know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So I told her, I said, do not sugarcoat anything for me at this point. I will not be able to live through this if you sugarcoat anything. I want to know exactly what's happening, and I want you to be as blunt as possible. And she was like, okay. And I think that was it's different, like that's not a usual thing for doctors. They're usually not saying that they sugarcoat things. It's just they don't have on a regular basis people wanting them to be as blunt as I wanted them to be. And she was like, they essentially, so the nanny did CPR, and that was good. She was the reason that we had as long as we had with him. And she did everything she needed to do. She did everything properly. But I guess they had to restart his heart twice. And they were able to get good rhythm back after the second time, and he was stable. But because his brain, even for the less than 5 minutes that he had without oxygen, every second counts. And I didn't realize until this situation that every second counts for oxygen to your body and your brain.
Yep.
And she said that when they tested his blood, which they test, like, it's called, like, blood acid levels. It it was off the chart. It wasn't even measurable. And so the numbers that were shown to her were beyond livable numbers. And so I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And she was like, I can't tell you right now because I don't even know what this is going to look like. The numbers are showing me that it's not going to be a livable prognosis. And I'm like, okay, so what's the plan now? And she was like, he's getting everything situated. We can go and see him in probably about like 5 minutes after they hook up. They had to do a lot of different ports. So they had a port in his neck. They had a port in his femoral. And so they were like, we're just trying to make sure everything is where we need it to be in case something happens and we need to administer something or whatever. So I was like, okay. And she said, we're going to get the CT results back. And she said it looked like they got them. She just needed to review them. And then it's going to be a day by day kind of thing. But I will be honest, I do not see with the levels that he had, patients don't make it past make it to the 72-hour mark where that's where we needed to do the MRI. And let the swelling go down. I said, okay. And so after a little bit, they did let us in there. And I just remember there was just tubes everywhere and just IV monitors going off. And I just looked at him and I was just like, oh, this is not my kid. And I didn't know what to think. I just sat there with him and I was just like, I don't even know. But the biggest thing was, so his pupils were dilated and fixed, and that's usually not a good outcome. But he was initiating all the breaths on the ventilator and overpowering the ventilator. So that's a really good sign. And so again, it was just a waiting game. It was all a waiting game. And they were trying to make sure he didn't have any fevers, his blood pressure. They were trying, he wasn't on any heart medication or any blood pressure medication, which is good at that time. But he was still getting fevers, which is trauma. That's a sign of trauma to the brain. And so, again, it was just trying to manage him and get him comfortable and whatnot. And so I didn't sleep at all that night. I remember I was just up and down all night. And my friend Amanda stayed with me because I'm not saying I didn't understand some of the things that the doctors are saying, but I needed her to turn that talk to English for me. And so she did, and she stayed for 5 days with me. She didn't leave my side. And she stayed with every single conversation with the doctors. It was amazing. The next day, it would have been about the 24-hour mark. And there was a bunch of time where there was no answers. There was no things were getting better. It was just kind of stagnant. And 24 hours went by. We made it through the 24 hours, still stable. And about 36 to 40 hours, we noticed his arm started moving. And I was like, oh my God, his arm's moving. He was going like this. And I didn't think about it the way that the doctors said, that those reactions were actually from seizures. And I thought he was moving. I was like, oh my God, like, this is great. He's made it this far, and usually babies don't make it this far with the amount of damage and the numbers that he had. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so they hooked him up to an EEG to see brain activity and seizures. And sometimes he would do the movement when there wasn't a seizure, but it was just muscle. It ended up just being muscle.
Like twitches or something?
Twitches, yeah. Okay. And so that was very hard because every time we see him move a leg or toes or hands or anything like that, it would make you feel so happy, but then you get crushed all over again. And He did. So the way that they described it, the neuro described it to me when she came in after we got the EEG results. They did 24 hours of EEG, and she explained that there is brain activity. It's so with babies and children, they will always have some sort of activity on their EEGs. It's not like a normal person. Like a person who's brain dead, it would just be a straight line and there would be no activity. Children and babies, they will always have some sort of activity on the EEG. Now, he was having weird activities that were above the brain dead prognosis. So, and then you would see the seizure spikes. So there was activity, and then there was some seizures, and then so we knew that there was some. Not all parts of his brain was damaged, but from what we could see, majority was. So our new goal was to make sure we made it to the 72-hour mark where that's when the swelling would all go down, and we would get him into an MRI and see how much damage was done. At this time, I was talking with the nanny. She was explaining everything from that night, and so I did get that reassurance, and I remember she was just like, "So sorry. I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Please understand, I'm not mad at you. I'm not like, you did everything you were supposed to do." And she really wanted to see him, and I wanted her to see him. So she came actually the next day to see him, and I fair warned her. I was like, there's a lot of tubes, there's a lot of wires and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just want to fair warn you. And she was like, okay. And I remember her coming in, and this part always gets me. She was so at the time they had like a crib, like the normal crib, like a crib kind of bed for him. And I remember she was just holding his hand and kissing his forehead, and I remember she was praying to God. She was like, "Please take me instead." And I guess that's really hard for me to understand, because I'm like, you have a child at home, and the fact that you want to switch places, and she just was bargaining and begging, and I felt so bad. And I remember after they left that day, her and her fiance, after they left, I remember I fell to the ground and I was screaming because I was trying to be strong for her, right? But seeing that, I just lost it. And I remember the nurse, like, there was a window so she could see into the room. And she came in and she just hugged me and she was like, "What can I do?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she just sat with me on the ground and she just hugged me while I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And um during that time we had a lot of family coming in. And so they flew in, and because we didn't know if this was going to be goodbye, we didn't know anything at this point. So we wanted to make sure that everybody got to see him. And ended up, while we were waiting, for all these things and waiting to get to the 72-hour mark, we had family where we were not supposed to have that many people in the room, but we did, and they allowed us because I think that they knew the outcome of the situation. And so we were in there and we were just trying to be happy and playing games and talking and drinking coffee and just all these things. But from what I've heard from people in my family, that they could tell that I was just not there. And I wasn't. I didn't really, like, I was just I'm not myself. I didn't really know what to do, if that makes sense. And so um ended up, and this, it starts going into, there was some issues because they needed to, I mentioned very early on, which was, I know could have been, it could be very disheartening to people, that I mentioned organ donation right away. And I know that that can be hard on some people, like, you're giving up on your kid. I was like, no, I'm not giving up. I just want to make sure every avenue is figured out. And I remember for organ donation, which I didn't talk to organ donation yet, but the doctor, one of the people from organ donation said that they would have to get in contact with Drexton's dad.
Okay.
And
yeah. Because he
at
hadn't.
this time, at this time, Drexton's dad didn't know what was going on.
Okay.
No one told him, and there was a big safety reason for that.
Yes.
For the people at the hospital, for me, for Drexton, that room needed calmness and needed peace for healing and whatnot. So yes, it hurts me knowing that he couldn't say goodbye, but there's reasons for everything.
Yeah.
So they told me that they needed to get contact to Drexton's dad. And I was like, no. I was like, you can't. He's not going to agree to this.
Yeah.
And I also, at that time, doctors were starting to talk about whether to place a trach tube and end of life care and all that kind of stuff. It was just going over end of life care. If we want to keep him going, if this turns out to be this, you can decide on a permanent trach, a GI tube, all that kind of stuff. And they would need his dad's consent on that as well. And I said, we can't do this. Like I tried to explain to them over and over and over, not his two doctors. His two doctors understood. So he had one doctor, they were switching off 24-hour. And those were his two doctors to the end. They understood where I was coming from. It was other people in social work and all that who were not understanding.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have the order of protection here. He's a protected party. And it literally states that. I gave him all the information. I gave him everything. And it was to the point that I actually left the hospital to go speak to a judge that day because they were trying to fight me so hard on this. And I was like, you guys are not understanding. There's laws on this. There's statutes. Like, why are you not listening?
Yeah.
And they were like, we'll need you to go see a judge. And I was like, fine.
Okay,
I should be here in the hospital with my son and spending as much time, but fine. If this is what I need to do, you don't have to ask me twice. So that day I went to go see a judge, and I remember his doctor called me, his main doctor, and was like, I just got off the phone with the ethical board, and they are saying that you do not have to have the ethical board is actually going to take the decision if there's quality of life.
Yeah.
And they will make the decision. So we don't have to get in contact with that about this part of the thing. And I was like, I just drove to the courthouse for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. So we drive back. And I remember social worker, as we're coming back down the hallway to go to his room, the social worker comes up to me and was like, here's your order of protection. I still have to contact his dad. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, I literally just got back from the courthouse. There was so many different situations that they would have needed to contact next of kin, right? So I was just like, I remember I looked at her and my sister, because my sister went with me, and she looked at me and she could tell I was just furious. And she kind of was like, I don't know if I should get in the middle of this or what's going on. And I literally looked at her and this is really bad on my part. I was just so mad. I took the papers and I threw them in her face and I was like, go read the laws and statutes and then we can have a conversation. But until then, do not come anywhere near me. And she was just like, it was I definitely was very immature on that situation, but it was still like, it's very frustrating when you're trying to advocate for your son and you got all these people just coming in and just causing issues. So I remember I got back to the room and I told the nurse, I was like, do not let that lady back near me. Don't let her come near my room. Nothing. She's like, okay. Because they understood, all the nurses. We had such amazing nurses. And they knew. They were like, we understand and we know where you're coming from. And so after that, again, it was just going back to the waiting game. He was still stable. No changes. His eyes did slowly start to not dilate.
Oh, okay.
So they were going down in numbers, but they did stay at a 3. And and they were still fixed. And so ended up, we got the MRI results back, and I remember I had Amanda in the room with me, and that was it, just to help me understand the information that the neuro was telling me. And everybody else was in a waiting room, and I kind of just wanted to process all the information by myself before everybody else heard the information, and also regulate what my family was hearing, because I don't think they could have handled it so blunt compared to how I handled
I
it
see.
bluntly.
Yeah. Okay.
So neuro came in, and she was a very, very nice lady. And she showed me the results, and his doctor was there too, and his nurse. And I remember I was sitting down, and she was explaining, she was like, okay, this is what it looks like. And she showed me 2 scans. And she was like, these are his 2 lobes. And the gray matter is all the parts that is damaged. It's not dead, but it's damaged. And both sides of his lobe were damaged.
Oh.
And so I'm like, okay, I mean, that's pretty severe deficit if we're talking. And she was like, yes. And she was like, I know that we talked about if there was a part of his brain that was still good and that wasn't damaged, it can kind of take over the other side of the brain that's damaged and whatnot.
Yeah.
But there was no healthy tissue. So I said, okay, what does that look like? And she was like, he will have very severe deficits, but my main concern is the subhouse, is what they call it, like the central part of your brain that controls basic function.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And she showed me another scan, and she circled it, and she was like, this is the part of the brain that is basic for breathing, heart, everything, opening your eyes, everything, all that. And she said, I remember I looked at it and I was like, why is it a different color? And she was like, because it's dead tissue. Oh. And I said, so you can't fix that? And she said, no. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And she said, that means he's never going to open his eyes. He's never going to move. He'll never be able to breathe by himself. And he will look as he looks right now for the rest of his life. I was like, okay. What can you say? Like, what can you say to those type of answers? And so I said, okay, what happens from here? And she said, we can start making decisions. You don't have to make the decision now. You take as long as you need. And at this time, this is what the 5th day, 4th or 5th day that we're in there. And she's like, you take as long as you need. And at some point, we'll have to make a decision about a trach and a GI tube, or if you just want to start talking about end-of-life care. And so I said, okay, I can't give you a decision right now. There's just not going to happen, but I will give you guys a decision. And she said, okay. And so I asked them, I said, please go tell my family in the quiet room what you told me, but in a very not as harsh way. And I will let them know when I'm ready to have people in here. And I sent Amanda to go kind of answer some questions and put things to English. And I sat there and I was just like, okay, like, I don't know. I was blank. I didn't even know what to think. And so I remember a couple hours go by, and I was like, I want a trach and I want a GI tube. I'm not ready to let my son go. And my friend Amanda was like, Paris, we need to go have a conversation outside. And we have a friendship where we are blunt with each other. If you're acting silly, I'm going to tell you you're acting silly or something like that. We're very 100% transparent with each other. And she said, we need to go take a walk. And I said, okay. So we go to take a walk, and she was like, Paris, I need you to understand what you're about to agree to, and not the consequence, but your life is gonna look like for the rest of your life. And I said, okay. In my head, putting a trach and a GI tube meant I can have him as long as I want until I'm ready to let him go.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. When you place in this situation, when you place a GI tube in a trach, that is a permanent 100% commitment for the rest of his life until he passes away on his own natural causes. And I didn't know that. I just thought it was until I was ready, to let him pass. And she was like, no. And she looked at me and she said, if you for some reason accidentally forgot to change his trach or something that led and then he died, you then would go to jail for murder. You can't just stop taking care of him. You can't just stop care. It's for the rest of your life, and you will have to change your whole entire home. And she was being honest about what life would really look like at this point, because nothing would change with Drexton. He would still be the same, other than he would just grow longer, grow older, turn into a toddler, but wouldn't ever move. He'd be in the same exact position as he is now. And I was like, so he's going to outlive me and my children? And she's like, not your children, not Cash, but Cash will have to take care of him until he passes away. And I said, no. What kind of life is that? That's not fair for him to be in and out of hospitals and all that kind of stuff. And not only thinking about that, but I also have to think about Cash. I have to think about his life. And it's just not fair. And it would be totally different if, we could do if he didn't have the amount of damage that he had to his brain, if there were some deficits or even a lot of deficits, but he could have a life, that'd be a totally different decision.
Yeah.
And so I was like, thank you for telling me, because I wouldn't have understood that was what was going to be happening.
Yeah.
And so I went in there and I told the doctor, I was like, this is my decision, and I need until Saturday. And at this point, this was Tuesday or Wednesday. Okay. And I said, I need till Saturday. And I'll be ready to let him go on Saturday. And they were like, okay. And I was like, please send in organ donation. And I want to talk to them. I want to get everything. I was literally planning everything out, because I was like, as soon as this Saturday comes, you won't be able to answer. I won't be able to answer questions. Yep. I won't be able to make decisions. Yep. I was like, I need everything planned out now. I want funeral stuff planned out. I need ceremony of life stuff planned out. I need to figure out organ donation. I need to figure out all this. It needs to be all planned out now. So I had certain days that were just for legal stuff.
Yeah.
And then end of life stuff, and then ceremony of life and stuff like that. So ended up, we were able to figure out all the legal stuff in like one day. Organ donation got all their stuff figured out that they needed to, because I told her, I was like, you're not getting anything if you guys have to go this route. I was like, you're not getting anything. Mm-hmm. And they were like, okay. And so they did. That whole hospital found out about new policies and that they didn't even know. They were not educated on.
Yeah.
And so they now educated, and they even said, I had doctors coming in, they're like, we had no idea these things existed. And I was like, oh wow, I have to go through it for you guys to learn something. Yeah, like that's great. And so that was really hard, but we got that all figured out. And I was like, I remember I told the doctor, I said, as long as this doesn't happen to someone else, I'm glad it happened to me, because now I know there should be no reason that anybody else should go through this.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was also talking to investigators. We had family still coming through and saying goodbye. And I remember, I think Saturday was the 1st, June 1st. It was Friday or Saturday.
Okay.
I think it was Saturday. But it was more, everything in the hospital changed. Like, everybody's emotions changed. No one acted the same after we all got the news. and it was quiet. It was quiet. There was no fun playing games anymore. There was no laughter.
Yeah.
It was just silent at
Yeah.
that point. And this is where I probably should have stated this before. Drexton had a nickname, and his name was Buddha Baby. And my sister came up with that because every time we would FaceTime her or be on a video, the way he would sit, it literally looked like a Buddha. He had like this huge belly, and it was super funny.
Yeah.
So she came up with that name, and it just stuck. And he would actually respond to Buddha Baby. It was the funniest thing.
Oh.
So during this time, there was still a lot of waiting around because I told him I needed until Saturday. And they didn't give me a time either. Like, that's another thing. Like, they didn't say, "Oh, you only have a week with him or 2 weeks," or whatever. They were like, "As long as you need."
Yeah.
But just understand that the longer he's like this, like, his body, we're keeping his body going.
Yeah, but that's so hard
It's hard, and it's gonna be hard on his body, it's gonna be hard on his organs, and organ donation has some certain requirements, so we had to also meet those.
Yeah.
So, I remember the nurse that was on, he had 2 nurses that switched. One the nurse from Friday and Saturday to Sunday, was his night nurse, and then he had another nurse who it was pretty much the same nurses. I don't know how it was perfect because they were all coming back. It was always the same nurse, and I did tell the doctors and the charge nurse, I wanted only the same nurses if possible, and only the best nurses that you have.
Yeah.
Because also during this time, we had doctors from the local children's hospital communicating with these doctors that he had. So we were all like, we had people from out of state. We had different doctors, like trying to make sure we did everything that we could have for the best prognosis, if that makes sense. And so, I also, his doctor was very, very nice to the point where I was like researching like crazy, like different things. And I was like, "Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this?" Even though I got the prognosis, right? And she took out of her own time, she printed out every single medical journal that I sent her and highlighted and went over it and showed me, "Okay, this is the reason we can't do this. This is we possibly could do this, but he would have to be off the ventilator." And she was just though it just meant so much that she took the time.
Yes.
And when she has so many patients, she took the time to make sure that everything I was asking, she answered. And I'm gonna tell you, she had a ton of patients on the floor, and anytime anything new changed, or she was in Drexton's room 4 to 5 times a day, both of his doctors. They were in there constantly. They were watching the nurses. They were helicopter parents for this kid, like, literally. It was amazing. And it was just amazing the things that she did, both the doctors. They were just absolutely fantastic.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. And then another thing that was really amazing is I remember I told his one doctor who was there when he passed away, I said, "I need to make sure I can let go of him because I couldn't do it in the emergency room," which is another sorry to jump, but the emergency room doctor that night actually came up and saw him 4 days later and wanted to see him. And I was like, "That doesn't usually happen." And he did. He said, "I wanted to come and see him and see how he was doing." And I was like, "Sorry for cursing at you, in that night because of your cowboy boots." And he was like, "It's fine, it's fine." And
he knows.
He kinda and he kinda told me what was going on because I don't remember, like, after I blacked out, he told me what happened and stuff like that, and so it kinda connected more things that I didn't notice I didn't know that would happen.
Okay.
But I talked to the doctor, I said, I'm worried that I won't be able to let go of him, and I need to let go because of organ donation. They have only a certain amount of time to get to the OR." And she was like, "I understand. And you know what? I'm going to call down to the emergency room, and I'm going to have you get checked out by one of the doctors down there, and I'm going to have them prescribe you something very minimal, but just to take the edge off just a little bit so you can let go. And I was like, okay. And I didn't even have to wait. They took me into a room right away, and I remember the doctor in there again had cowboy boots.
Whoa.
A totally different doctor had cowboy boots, and he was like, doctor, your son told me what was going on, and how do you feel about being prescribed this? And Amanda was there too to kind of make sure I was getting prescribed the right stuff and it wasn't going to be too much or whatnot. And the doctors, they're just amazing. They were absolutely amazing. He was like, okay, take this one tonight, see how you feel. If you don't like this one, take this one. Or if none of these work for you,
come
right back down and I will give you something IV and you'll be good. And I was like, okay. And so that was on Friday. I started taking, I took some of the medication. And at that point, there was no more really conversating about decisions or anything like that. It was more of a day to myself. But I will say it was either Wednesday night or Thursday night, the hospital staff was really nice and they brought in a normal size bed so I could sleep with him. So they took him out of the crib.
Yeah.
And I slept with him every night. And I remember one night, it was just me. After Wednesday, I said, I don't want anybody staying with me overnight anymore. I just want it to be me and him. Because during the day, it was just mostly about everybody else seeing him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember laying with him. And at this point, he was initiating breaths on the ventilator, like really good and overpowering the ventilator.
Yeah.
So I remember I looked at him and I was laying with him and I was stroking his hair. And I said, if you're ready to go, you need to show me that you're ready and I will let you go. But if you're not, you got to show me that too, because I will keep fighting for you and I will never stop. And I just told him how much I loved him. And at that time, we had a doula. My doula actually was Cash, as a photographer, and she came in and took pictures of Cash and Drexton together playing and stuff like that, and us doing the handprints and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so she was there a lot, and then I also had a bereavement doula. I got that set up right away.
Yeah.
And she came, and the next day, we made his memory box and stuff like that, and we were just preparing everything. Yeah. And she was a blessing because I wouldn't have been able to handle anything without her trying to figure things out. And I guess when I fell asleep that night after I told him those things, I woke up the next morning and the doctor or his nurse, one of his really good nurses, told me, because I usually have them wake me up throughout the night to tell me if something happened, and they didn't that night, which I'm kind of glad they did. She said we had to turn up his ventilator because he stopped initiating breaths last night at about 2 a.m.
Oh.
And I was like, that's my sign that he was ready to go. And everything after that, like even before they told me that information, it just felt different. Like I didn't feel like he was there. I felt like he passed on already. Like it felt different. And so I was like, thank you for showing me this, that the sign I asked for, and this was the sign that you're ready. And so, I, at that point, we started coordinating his honor walk. And I wanted to make sure his honor walk, like what happened. I was like, I need all these people. I want this to happen. I want this song to be playing, all this stuff. And the investigator, who was actually a family friend of ours, and the officers who came out on scene, and the 911 dispatcher, she didn't correlate the last names, but she's known me since I was little.
Oh.
And they couldn't correlate the last name because obviously he had a different last name.
Mm-hmm.
Our family friend was the officer on scene.
Oh.
And he didn't realize, and he didn't make the connection. And so I asked the investigator, who was our family friend as well, I said, if you can, I really want those officers here for his honor walk. And she was like, I'll do the best I can, like it's really hard on them too. And I was like, I understand. I was like, but I would really appreciate that. And I had everything coordinated. We were going over doctors, what it's going to look like, things like that. And Saturday came along, and this is also, I definitely left this out, but it's important. That Friday that he first was brought into the PICU, his doctor said she heard a heart murmur, and I had never been told that ever. No one ever told me he had a heart murmur. And she was like, "Well, it's not important right now, but if he does things go the other way, we'll need to. That's an important thing." I said, "Okay."
Okay.
And organ donation, they came and they did an echocardiogram on his heart, and they confirmed that he had a very large ASD.
Oh.
And didn't even occur to me at the time. They just said, we don't know if his heart will be viable for donation. Because of the ASD. But if you are okay with it, can we do heart valves? And I said yes. I was like, that's fine. So I signed a paper for that if they couldn't do his heart. And that day was kind of they were supposed to start everything withdrawing care at 4:30 on Saturday. And it felt like the morning went by so slow, but I also didn't want it to go any faster. It was really weird. I was like, I don't want it to go faster, but I feel like it's going so slow, and I'm just dreading this moment. And the whole organ donation team, the surgical team, everybody that came in, and I remember there was one guy, and one of the guys, who was actually one of the surgical techs or whatever, he came in and he introduced himself, and I remember I was like, "You look like a surfer." I was like, that was the only thing I could think. I was like, "You look like a surfer." And he was super nice. And there was another guy who covered in tattoos. You would think, not trying to judge, but I was like, "Oh, you look a little scary." But covered in tattoos. And I remember we were talking with them, and it was right before we were going to do his honor walk. He came in, and I looked at him, and I was like, please keep my baby safe and watch him like he's your own. And I remember he started crying, and I knew he was trying to like not cry. And he was like, I promise I will keep him safe, and I will love him as my own. And so I just remember he then went to the OR, and the other surgical tech went to the OR to get things ready, because as soon as the organ donation, or not organ donation, the honor walk was done, we would start withdrawing care, and it could be a couple minutes, it could be hours, we didn't know. So and they needed time to set up, and they already had matches too. I didn't know about the matches. I just knew that there were matches for organs. So I didn't get to see him because I was crying, but they let me hold him. I got in bed with him, and I was holding him during the honor walk. And I didn't see how many people showed up, because I was crying, and I kept trying to get the tears out of my eyes so I could see, like this is such a big thing. And I just remember it was so quiet, and I could just hear people crying and sniffling, but I couldn't see anything. And I was just holding him, and I couldn't even look up. I don't even know. And I remember seeing photos, and there were just officers just lining the walls, and nurses and doctors and families and friends. And there was officers everywhere. And the two officers that were on scene that night with Drexton were right next to his door holding flowers. And you're not supposed to bring flowers on the PICU unit, but they let him. And I remember just laying there, and I was like, this is the slowest walk I've ever been on in my life. Like, slowest walk. but I also feel like it went so fast. And I remember we got in the room after the honor walk and they closed the blinds because I didn't want anybody to see. And it was just me, the team, the hospital team, so organ donation, our pastor who was there almost every single day. He was actually the police department's pastor, but he came every day to like anoint him with oil and stuff like that, and pray over him and pray for our family. And ended up, and then Amanda was in there because when you're drawing end of life care, there's a lot of things that could happen, and I needed to make sure I was educated in what decisions that was the only decision I would be making if something kind of went a totally different way. So she sat in the background, and then my doula and photographer, my bereavement doula, and then my doula who was taking pictures, she was in there, she was taking pictures. And I remember his doctor was in there, his nurse, who was his first nurse actually from the day that he got brought in. She was there when he passed away. But they were about ready to turn everything off and take his tube out. And I remember the big guy with tattoos comes running in the door, and he was like, "Stop, stop, stop, stop! Don't do anything yet." And they were like, "We had one of the machines has to recalibrate," and I was like, "Oh my!" I was like, I was just thinking my son is about to go right now, and then you come in here, and they're like, "We need time." So, but I also think that was Drexton because it gave me another 40 minutes. And I remember I just laid with him and I fell asleep. And I was just holding him. And I don't remember, but I was sleeping. And I was just holding him close. And mind you, I didn't get to hold him until this moment, the honor walk. And then this was the only time I got to hold him. Because there was a lot of things. If you wanted to hold him, they had to move the ventilator. They had to change all position wise. So this was my first time holding him since that Friday. Yeah. So, and I let everybody else. They did let certain people, like my mom, hold him and all that kind of stuff, and my sister. But it had to be like sprawled out, and it was like we had to get a respiratory team in there. We had to have certain nurses in there. So it was an ordeal if we were going to hold him. And I don't think I was ready to hold him yet, which sounds horrible, but ended up the 40 minutes goes by, and I remember his doctor looked at me and said, I told her, I said, "Don't talk to me. Don't turn the machines on mute. Just tap me on the shoulder when I need to put him down." And she said, "Okay." And it was quiet. And we just had his one song playing, which was crazy. Found this song 3 months before he passed, and I played it all the time for the kids, and the boys loved it. And it always calmed him down when he was crying. And I played that song, and like it was on repeat for like 2 hours is what it felt like. And they took the tube out, and they just waited, and I just cried. And I think the hardest part was he looked normal, and then started turning blue, and that's when I lost it. And he started turning blue, and the doctor was trying to see if his heart would. He passed away rather quickly, and I remember she tapped my shoulder, and I just started wailing, and I was like, "I'm so sorry." And I didn't stop saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And I remember I set him down and I put his stuffed animals next to him. And the pastor anointed him with oil and put his hand on his forehead and head. And then they took him. And I just fell to the ground. And I remember it's this open room. And I never even saw, there was like starfish underneath the bed, and then I saw all that's like what I remember. And I remember I just holding his bunny rabbit and just crying on the floor. And I just sat there. Just sat there crying. And I didn't want anybody in the room. I didn't want anyone near me. And about an hour later, the tattoo guy said he personally wanted to bring his bed back to me. And he went to the OR with all of his stuffed animals, blankets, all of that, and he brought everything back. And also, this is another really important thing. Everyone in the OR could only call him Buddha Baby. They were not allowed to call him Drexton. It was the cutest thing. And they made sure that he was called Buddha Baby during that part. And he brought the bed back, and I remember he just hugged me. And he was like, "Don't worry, I'm making sure that they're taking really good care of him." And I remember I just cried, and I got into his bed and I just laid there and I slept. And the doctors came in, and they told me, they were like, "We're able to fix his heart. So his heart will be going," which made me feel good.
Yeah.
And because that was really important to me. And they said, "You stay here as long as you need." And I said, "Oh, I'm not leaving until he's out of surgery. Like, I'm not going. I'm not leaving." And they were like, "Okay." And so I stayed, and I slept, and I laid in bed. And that song played on repeat the whole entire time, the 4 or 5 hour surgery. And after he was out of surgery, they helped me get things packed up because I wasn't going to stay because he wasn't, I just wanted to make sure he got out of surgery.
Yeah.
And I packed everything up and I headed home, and that was really like it. Like it was just yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. And then, yeah.
Oh, Paris, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It's like, it's hard because it's like, what do you say? You know, it's
no,
like,
that's all there is. I'm just so
yeah.
so sorry. Um, you went home after
Yeah.
that, and did you end up having a memorial service for him? And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, um, I went to the funeral home. I went to the funeral home almost every single day, and as soon as they transported him after the autopsy and stuff like that,
So you did
which,
have an autopsy.
yes, which I haven't got the report back, but there is some signs that, let's just say that he would have still been here potentially if that ASD was found. Um,
Oh,
so that's another thing that's been really hard to battle with, like knowing, um, and all those symptoms that he had when he was a baby that I were chalked up to be normal were not normal.
yeah.
Um, so, but so they got him back to the funeral home, and I remember I was like, "I need to see him." And they were like, "Well, we don't really advise that because in autopsies, they cut here and then they cut down a V." And I said, "I don't care. I know what it looks like. I've seen this stuff. I need to see him."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Okay." And so she let me see him. And I remember they had a rocking chair in there. And I remember I changed him um, into a different outfit. And I was just rocking him and holding him. I guess I didn't really understand. I totally forgot that they have to keep him cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was holding him, I was like, you are freezing cold."
Yeah.
And of course, I wrapped him in a blanket.
Yep. As
And
you do.
yeah, and I was just holding him, and I just sat there for hours and I just rocked him. And it did feel a little weird because, they're passed away. But I wasn't thinking about that. It was just more like he looked he looked better. I think it was because of the embalming and stuff and whatever they put on him.
Yeah.
It looked better than what he looked like when he passed away. And when I was holding him when he passed. He wasn't blue. He actually looked like kind of before, all this stuff happened. So it just felt different and it felt better. And not being in a hospital setting, holding him and stuff like that
was probably good
and
too.
So I sat with him for a while, and again, there was some more legal stuff because of cremation. They needed approval from next of kin.
Okay.
And I was like, I just went through this.
Are we doing this
again?
Went through this. Are we doing this again?
And we are able to figure out a loophole.
Okay.
So that was good. She was like, I've never had this either happen. And so we figured out a loophole. We just had to wait 15 days. And we had to wait to see if he got in contact with the funeral home. And mind you, the investigator did have, they have 3 days to give a death notice. And they have to. There was no getting out of that one.
Okay.
So she did say, she was like, I will wait the 3 days. Like to the last very minute. And she did. And she called him. And again was turned into my fault that he passed. That's what his dad said. And I was just like, okay. And I was like, that's the last of my worries right now. And so it was hard because we had to wait 15 days to see if his dad would put any objections or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he didn't. And so right before they took him to the other facility to get cremated, I asked if I could see him again. And because I would go every day.
Yeah.
Like literally every day just to go sit in the parking lot because it was the closest thing to feeling like he was home.
Mm-hmm.
Like where I was close to him. So I would drive and just sit in the parking lot for hours and just listen to music and just sit there. And then I remember it was the day before they were getting ready to transport him. I said, I know this is a huge request, but can I see him again? And she was like, I don't know what he's going to look like because it's been a long amount of time.
Yeah.
But let me go look at him and see if he's okay for you to see him again. I said, okay. And she came back and she said, you know what? He still looks pretty good. So, you can come in. You want to come in at like 12? And I said, yeah. So I went in and saw him again, and I just sat again and rocked for like 2 hours with him and just held him and talked to him and all that kind of stuff. Even though I knew it was just his body. Yeah. I knew that he was with me, like in spirit. It felt comforting just to hold him.
Yeah. And
then after that, they cremated him, and we had the arrangement was to have his ceremonial life at a winery that had like a huge pond and a willow that kind of like went over the pond. It was really beautiful. It was like out in the middle of nowhere. I will be honest. It was like in like a ravine of 2 mountains. Like it was beautiful. It was just really hard to get to.
Yeah.
And so we had his service there, and one of his things was dragonflies. Like that's how we know that he's around us is dragonflies. And this goes back to when we were in the hospital. One of the organ donation ladies had a dragonfly, a necklace, and I never even met her before until I was like walking to another room, and the original organ donation lady wanted to have her meet me, and she was like, I wanted to give you this. And I was like, okay. And it was a dragonfly necklace.
Huh.
And she was like, I've worn this. It represents my boys and all this kind of stuff. And it was so meaningful. And like literally, there was just dragonflies everywhere. Like I've never seen so many dragonflies. And so we had a ceremony. It was really beautiful. It was just really family. And we all rented like an Airbnb. So all of our family that came down, we all stayed together.
Yeah.
And I just remember the hardest part was when they called me like 2 or 3 days later after the ceremonial life that he was ready for pickup. And I don't know why, but when they say it, like, I know that they're being so not generous, they're trying to be careful in how they say things, but when they called me and said, "He's ready for pickup," I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all.
It doesn't sound great.
No, and, so I did go I picked them up, and we had a lovely lady. She makes urns, and she hand paints them,
Mm.
and it has dragonflies on it with
Oh.
eucalyptus, and, oh, it's just so beautiful. I'm, like, looking at it right now, and it's so beautiful. And they didn't I got the size that it should have been, right? And this was kind of a culture shock for me. They gave me him back, and of course in a bag, and I couldn't get the bag to fit into the top of the urn.
Oh.
So I literally had to cut the top off
Oh.
and then put another bag in the urn and then pour it into there, and then I was like, I have him on my hands. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god."
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm not ready to do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been hard. And that was what he had a really nice funeral and celebration of life, and we ended up getting news that his heart saved a 2-month-old little boy in California, and his kidneys saved a 37-year-old woman in California. So, yeah, made my heart really happy.
Yeah.
It's, like, so bittersweet. I
Yeah,
hate it.
it
I
really
hate it, but
is.
I love it.
Yeah, organ donation is that way.
Yes. Yeah, and, he's there was another I can't really go into, like, too much detail on it because there's, like, some HIPAA, but, about a day before, in the hospital that he passed, there was a baby who was only, like, 2 months old who came in a couple doors down,
Uh-huh.
and, she passed away from similar things, anoxic brain injury.
Uh-huh.
Um, she she didn't pass away just yet, but she had the same thing.
Yeah.
And I guess her mom and dad witnessed Drexton's honor walk, and I guess after we left, she did pass away. And Drexton's story inspired them to donate,
Oh.
and so they donated.
Yeah.
And they were so inspired by him in the honor walk that they did their own honor walk too, and they donated. And so it's just like he just feel like he's just helping people everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just so crazy.
Yeah, that is. I just a little life's rippled that
Yeah.
you don't even know how it's going to affect somebody. And
Yeah.
I just think of those two people that have Drexton's organs and that they get to have a
Yeah.
chance.
And I mean, I'm still waiting to hear if I can have contact with them. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And that's also very, very hard, I know, for people receiving
Yes.
organs because it can have some survivor guilt.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really hope one day I get to meet them or have contact with them, communication. But if not, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Paris, I had a couple of other questions because this was such
sure.
a beautiful and moving story. And I was wondering, did was Cash able to see his brother before he passed away?
Yes. So he was at the hospital a lot.
A lot. Okay.
It was I didn't have him in the room when he actually passed away. But he was actually with a child life specialist in the
Okay.
playroom. So he was playing with them and they were really good with him. They encouraged him to play with his cars with Drexton, handprints and drawing pictures and stuff like that. They were really, really good with him.
Okay.
And I have a couple very like special pictures of the boys laying together and him talking to his brother.
Okay.
And So yeah, he did, and the child life specialist and my bereavement doula got him some books that are for his age range to
Oh,
describe what's happening and to how to process those feelings. And yeah, so he did.
okay.
He got to. It was definitely hard for him to understand because he was like, "Oh, I want to go back to the hospital see baby brother," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's not. That's we
Yeah.
can't go back to the hospital."
Yeah.
And I think after reading those books and lots of talking and stuff like that, he struggled because he would tell people, "Oh, my baby brother's in the hospital." And I was after talking and helping him understand, just due to our beliefs, we explained to him that, he's with Jesus and he's in heaven, but he's with you. He's with you in your
Yeah.
heart all the time, and that will never change. And we also got him a we got a bear from the hospital that has his heart, like the sound of his heartbeat.
Yeah.
So he can press that and he can listen
Yeah.
to his
Oh,
brother. Yeah,
that's
it's really, really
wonderful.
sweet. But he also has a bunny rabbit that says Drexton's name on the ear.
Uh-huh.
And I told him, I said, you know what? When you play with this bunny rabbit, Drexton will come down from heaven and he'll play with you. And so you can play with the bunny rabbit and he'll be with you the whole entire time and he'll just play with you. And so that helps him too with
Yeah.
the because I think it's hard for him to understand the
Yes.
being away and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So putting an object, being like, oh, no, this you can play with this, and your brother's with you all the
Yeah.
time and playing with you and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's definitely he's doing a lot better than I feel like I am.
Well,
He's
it
so
is.
sweet. He's so sweet. He always tells me, he's like, yeah, my baby brother's in my heart. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh, you're so you're so nonchalant about this. And
yeah.
I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Little
wish I could be
kids.
you.
Yeah, those little kids, they just they get sad about it, but they also just have
Yes.
a little bit more, yeah.
Yeah. And
They
he does have his sad points. And I know, like, sometimes when he'll go to bed, he's like, I miss my baby brother.
oh,
And all this stuff. And it's hard because I'm like, I know you do. I know you do. And I wish I could have him here with you. And I wish you didn't have to go through this either,
yeah.
but yeah, he's handling it way better than I am.
Those little kids,
Yeah.
they help us so much.
Yeah. Literally.
Paris, thank you so much for telling
Of
us
course.
all about Jackson and
Of course.
his little personality and his impact on a lot of people's lives. And I
Yeah.
just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for
Course.
being
And thank you
willing.
for letting me tell a story.
Yeah.
And that means a lot. And oh, this is really a big thing too. I totally forgot to say this. The police department that was on scene, um, and those officers, I sent them letters like thanking them,
Oh, yeah.
individually and the chief. And I sent the chief of that police department a picture of his honor walk because it was you can see the police officer standing there
Yeah.
and it was just very empowering. And I remember I said to the officers that were on site that night, I said, "You are my son's hero." And I couldn't thank you enough for being there for him. And I got me and the investigator, we talk a lot. And she called me and she's like, "I have some really good news for you." Because I was like, "Oh, I hope they got my letters and I hope the
Yeah.
chief got my letter and
Yeah.
pictures and stuff like that." And she goes, the chief wants to dedicate Drexton at the police department and do a dedication and honoring for the officers and for Drexton if you're okay with that.
Oh,
And I was like, ah, my heart.
yeah.
My heart. That makes me so very happy.
Yeah.
Um, and he's just continuing
Yeah.
to change lives
Yeah. Which is
and have an
so,
impact on people.
yeah, which is just so beautiful and inspiring despite how sad this has been. And it's
Yeah.
just, um, yeah, what a cool honor
Yeah.
to be able to hear his story with you today.
Yeah.
So thank you, Paris, so
You.
much.
Thank you so much.